Welcome back to the Self Trust Solution Podcast. Today's episode is for every leader who has ever felt the pressure to move faster, do more, or keep pace with chaos, even when something inside them said, this isn't the way. Our guest, Colleen Goepfert, is a tech executive and the creator of Build Without Chaos, a podcast and platform explaining what calm, intelligent leadership looks like after the noise. Colleen is known for bringing clarity and composure to high growth SaaS environments, guiding teams through the shift from reactive growth to intentional scale. But that clarity didn't come from a playbook, it came from self trust. Colleen's story includes walking away from roles that looked perfect on paper but felt wrong in practice, creating her own platform rooted in calm leadership, and learning to pause before big decisions, even when urgency felt productive. We can all relate to that, right? Her before and after journey shows us that self trust doesn't just change how we feel, it changes the results we create, the teams we build, and the leaders we become. Welcome, Colleen.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yes. Before self trust reshaped the way you lead, what did your career and leadership style look like?
Yeah. So I came from high growth tech environments, and it's an industry that is very much built on urgency, speed, and constant change. And for a long time, I thought leadership meant matching that pace.
Yeah.
So I built strategies and teams and systems that delivered results. But underneath it all, I was running on reaction instead of self trust.
Mm.
And eventually I realized that chaos wasn't the enemy. It's the invitation to look underneath what's going on in the surface of things and really have an honest conversation with yourself about what needs to change. And that insight became the foundation for my framework, Build Without Chaos. And it's how I help leaders move from decoding the noise of chaos to designing clarity and getting actual results. So when you and I talk about self trust today, for me, it's definitely not something that's abstract. It's what's allowed me to stop chasing alignment externally and start leading from it internally.
Sure. So, what were some of the signs in those times that something wasn't aligned?
Yeah. So before I really trusted myself, leadership felt reactive. So I was moving fast, chasing outcomes, managing noise instead of my own clarity. Saying
Well,
yes to
I mean, to
everything
be
felt.
fair, that's kind of the norm, right? Like that
Mhm.
is what you were seeing in that high paced environment. So, what to you kind of started to speak that this wasn't in alignment with you?
Yeah, it absolutely is the norm, and it's how people are operating in the environments I was in. But what I realized in chaos wasn't from other people, it was from me second guessing what I already knew.
Mm.
And when I look back, it felt like we were in constant motion with no results, which just created so much frustration with team members. We were all doing the right thing, but it was still chaotic.
Mm.
And how did this start manifesting? We started seeing it with deadlines slipping, although we were trying our best, constant meetings on calendars to keep up with the chaos, push harder, outpace the chaos, instead of really understanding what was going on.
Mhm. Yeah. So you've shared that some of these roles really looked great on paper, but felt
Mhm.
misaligned in practice. What
Yeah.
did that feel like in that day to day?
Yeah. So that was a big turning point for me. I found myself in leadership environments where giving your opinion was mistaken as confrontation.
Mm.
You were labeled as too intense. And that's when I really had to have an honest conversation with what I wanted from work environments and how I wanted to show up as a leader. And I just remember there was a specific meeting where I softened my stance to keep the room calm. And that was my breaking point. That's when I saw that that's not who I am and this is not the environments I want to be leading in. And I had a big realization there where I saw if I'm in a position where I need to shrink my clarity to stay comfortable, that's not leadership, that's survival.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
so for me, like I had to think about how I wanted to show up. So I stopped matching the dysfunction around me in that environment and started designing my own clarity.
And what did that look like?
So I think once you start thinking that way, of course the first test will come up. And I remember there was this one environment where we had a reorg happen and we were also having a system migration. And for me, that was a fork in the road because I could have taken two directions. One, I could have communicated the corporate spin on what was going on. Or the second, I could lean into clarity and be transparent with my team on what I knew to be right and how we can move forward. And when I leaned into transparency, I could see everyone exhaled.
Mhm.
And in that moment, I saw that transparency builds momentum faster than control ever will.
Yeah.
And that moment turned into a rhythm and became the standard in how we move forward as a team.
Yeah. So you kind of trusted your pace and your energy instead of the external expectation.
Yeah,
And
I
that
did.
became kind of the foundation. So what helped you trust your own read of things even when it didn't match the pace or culture around you?
I had to look inward and understand that even though my environment is chaotic and the leadership above me or around me may still be functioning on chaos, that doesn't mean that that's how I show up. I think you can show up yourself authentically with who you are and bring clarity in a chaotic environment. And I will say that if you're waiting for leadership to recognize it's a chaotic environment or your peers to recognize it, you're going to be waiting for a very, very long time. It really is about you showing up with your own clarity to impact your own environment. And so when I started on that journey, I realized that the clarity replaced the chaos, not because it went away, but because I was able to actually navigate it in a way that I felt comfortable.
Yeah, because instead of reacting to it, would you say you started responding to yourself and
Exactly.
what you needed, what you thought was best for your leadership style, for your team? Yeah.
And what I saw is an environment that's built on pressure, it never lasts. It's clarity and structure that people actually trust and they want to be around. People want structure. And they wanna know that they're being heard in an environment. And that's the real work, right? It's keeping things steady when the noise gets loud around you.
Yeah. Well, I think what you're describing is very clearly when we shift internally, it impacts the external.
Yeah,
But when we try and fight external, if we try and fight the chaos, whether it's giving into it or resisting it, you're fighting a not winning battle. But if you can shift who you are in that chaos and how you lead, then it will happen on the external.
absolutely. And that's what I started to see happen in my environment.
Yeah. Now you chose to change, and we're going to talk about that. You chose to walk away from that.
Yeah.
But knowing what you know now, for people who are in that chaos, when we really look at the power of who you are in the chaos, um, what would you suggest? Like, what would you do now if you were to choose to stay in knowing what you know now, having the self trust and the agency over your experience? What would you say?
I would say that people need to start small. Like, I think when you think of chaos, it can be really overwhelming. There's so many things that need to be fixed. right? So I look at my current environment and I listen to the people on my team and what they're talking about and what is impacting them and what we can change in that moment as a team together. I call it digging at your feet, right? Like, let's not dig a mile away. Let's dig right with what we can impact as a team and as people. And you'd be surprised with how much momentum you could just get with that.
I love
And
that.
people, yeah, and people start understanding that change is something that's tangible in an environment rather than something that's abstract and we talk about but we never actually get to.
Yeah, because there's a question I always love to ask, because there's a point where we are in the chaos. We either want to change everything or we think we can't change anything, so we do nothing. And that's what the what's at our feet is so good. I like to ask the question, what are you over owning that's yours? What are you
Yeah.
owning that is? And that's a place that we can really look to see where that impact is, to your point, which is so good.
Yeah, it's interesting because in a lot of chaotic environments, you'll start to see that role clarity plays a huge part. People are doing things that are out of their scope, and that's burnout right there,
You
you
start
know?
to feel so out of control. I think sometimes this is from my experience, and let me know, if you've seen this too, but when I was in hospitality towards the end, I was really in that frantic space of putting my hands in everything that wasn't mine. And that was
Yeah.
creating the burnout. But it was this sense of being out of control and not um feeling like I was making the impact I wanted to make that made me try and touch everything instead of focusing on my own ideal. And I think so many of us can do that. And that's why this your feet
Yeah,
speaks truly to me. And hopefully someone out there is listening, because there are people that aren't going to be able to leave the chaos.
right.
And so really beginning to learn how to work with it or through it. And sometimes that can be as simple as not describing it as chaos.
Yeah. Maybe it's just your priorities and being clear on exactly what they are and communicating that.
Yeah, so good. Now you did decide to leave. So
I
tell
did.
us a little bit about that, leaving that role that looked great on paper and was pretty great in optics.
Yeah.
What made you choose? Would you say like alignment over optics?
Yeah, I think that you reach a point where you need to understand what your own priorities are in life and how you want to operate. And I think with burnout, you are in it, you're in the environment, and you don't actually know that you're burnt out until you walk away. You're kind of on the hamster wheel. And so for me, I think stepping away from the noise was the best thing I could do for myself because what I started to do was I launched a podcast called Build Without Chaos. And that's where I talk to other senior leaders that have experienced chaos themselves in very high pressured environments with very high roles and how they're now choosing a different way. And what I learned there is the chaos is always going to be around us, no matter what, in any environment. There's no really escaping it. It's how you mitigate it and it's how you choose to move through it. And so once I started having those conversations, I realized everyone's experiencing the same thing. Now, there's going to be times you're going to have your non negotiables in chaotic environments, right? Some are going to be more toxic than others. But I think really aligning on what you want and what's going to make you happy is really important because showing up to work every day in chaotic environments where you're not showing your true self is not a place to be. At least it wasn't for me.
So what did make you choose to leave that role?
I think it was really just looking internally and understanding what I needed to be happy and following that.
Yeah. So
It was
what came
actually
up?
kind of
Like what self doubt came up? Did you have any? Like, what was kind of the inner dialogue that was going on around that?
Yeah. Well, I think anytime you leave an environment that looks good on paper, you start thinking, what are people going to think? Or what am I going to do next?
Mhm.
Right. And I think that's really the time where you need to hold true to your values and what you want.
Yeah. How did you navigate through those types of inner doubts?
Really holding true to what my non negotiables were.
Mm.
And what is that? It's calm leadership, it's strategic roadmaps, it's companies that grow and scale with leadership that's aligned with that. It's avoiding environments that are built on a baseline of urgency.
Mm.
Because I've seen that that doesn't work, not only from a results standpoint, but it also doesn't work for me as an individual.
Yeah.
And so I had to really hold true to what it is that I wanted in a work environment.
And what I love about this is it doesn't make your time in those environments wrong. In fact, it makes them quite
Perfect.
fruitful, right?
Yeah.
Because this is how we learn. This is how we grow. And it's so easy to get into moments of hating what we don't like instead of using it as fuel for what we want and using
Yeah.
it as education for what we want.
Yeah.
So you launched Build Without Chaos. That's courageous, right? Starting your own platform is a courageous step. So what was the moment of conviction for launching Build Without Chaos?
I wanted to explore another way of thinking about chaos. And I thought having conversations with other people was the best way to do it. And I simply thought, Dawn, if I want to have these conversations, maybe other people want to hear them too.
Mm.
And so that's how I launched Build Without Chaos. And then from those conversations, I designed a framework to start helping different companies in the advisory work that I do of how you show up in your environment and how you build without chaos. And so in that framework, I talk about decoding the chaos. And that's the first step. Understanding where energy is being wasted, unclear ownership is happening, where there's misalignment. And from there, it's designing the calm. So identifying structure, putting together a phase plan into how you actually move forward to what is causing the chaos in your environment and start proving out results. And you'd be shocked. A lot of people don't take that step to designing the calm. They kind of sit in decoding the chaos for a long time. And I believe you need to design the calm before you can actually build without chaos and scale appropriately with results.
Yeah. You have to know where you're going
You do.
to
And you have to,
be able to visualize it and to make the plan to get there, right?
yeah, and you have to diagnose what's causing chaos. You know, there's a lot of chaos in environments.
But would
And
you agree that if you actually design what you want it to look like and start making steps to move there, the chaos is probably going to be rectified in many ways. Maybe not completely, but
yeah, I mean, I think you start to understand that you can move forward with structure and it's not so chaotic. The first thing I notice is that there's a calm and a silence amongst everybody. And all of a sudden it causes alignment. So you move from this environment where it's chaotic, everyone's complaining all the time. What are we going to do? How are we going to get there? To designing the calm, which is essentially alignment and understanding what is causing the chaos. And in your environment, that shows up as an established structure that people start to follow.
yeah, it's like strategic intentionality because what I see often is, there are companies that are built out of maybe necessity, maybe
Yeah.
during a time of chaos like the pandemic. We have a lot of companies that are around that were built and started from that, or just from something as amazing as excitement. Like, there's a need out there. But
Yeah.
when it's built in that either excitement or in that necessity, there is a lot of urgency involved. And through that, we start reacting. We call it like the spaghetti stage of business. And in that is where chaos can build. But it's never too late to introduce those strategies that designing the calm. So I love that that's something you're helping people with. So you said one of your ongoing practices is learning to pause before big decisions, resisting that urgency even when it feels productive.
Yep.
Tell us about that.
Yeah. So what I've realized is calm leadership isn't passive. It's a muscle that you start building over time because there's always going to be chaos. It's never going to go away. So it's really working on what that looks like in your everyday environment and to pause and think through choosing clarity over urgency and not get engulfed in your environment that is running on a level of urgency. So by no means do I say like urgency is never going to be around. It absolutely is, and it especially is in high growth tech environments. And it should be. It's an environment that's a disruptor, right? So it's there. But you don't need to run on a baseline of urgency. It's stopping and understanding what the ask is, how this impacts your priorities for you and your team, and choosing a clear path forward. Again, it's this reaction to the environment that isn't healthy. And that's really what I noticed in myself in my work environments was I was reacting. I wasn't coming from a place of clarity and calm.
Mhm.
And I think when I think back of decisions made in environments where it was chaotic and I made decisions from a chaotic place, they never worked out.
Mm.
They were always fragmented, rushed, didn't provide the results that we all thought that they would. But when I look back in environments where I paused, I took a breath, I understood what the ask was and came up with a clear path forward and communicated that. Those were the results that still stick around today.
Of course, right? Because urgency really is about scarcity. It's like fear of
Yeah.
not something. And there's a difference. I always like to say it's very, you can still be fast. You can still act
Yeah.
quickly. You can still like, very and the more structure and decisions you've made ahead of time, the faster those you can act on it. But when it's from that scarcity and fear that creates the urgency, it's just not. You don't get it done as fast. It actually expands time. It takes longer. Whereas being more strategic, um, actually collapses time.
Oh, it collapses time.
Yeah,
Absolutely. It gives you a roadmap to an end goal.
yeah.
So I think that's really what it comes down to. And again, my biggest learning was not reacting to my environment, which is what I was doing constantly. Because what you're doing is you're reacting to everyone's chaos.
Yeah.
And that's not a way to operate as a leader, nor just live in life. Constant fire drill after fire drill. It's just a recipe for burnout.
Yeah. So, how has your leadership changed since making those decisions, those shifts?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. So today, I lead through clarity, not control. So my follow through is anchored in transparency, not urgency. And I gave that example earlier about not reacting to my environment in that moment where we had the system migration and the reorg happen.
Mm.
So I don't rush decisions just to show motion. And I think that's a mistake a lot of leaders are making. It's if you move quick, everyone's thinking, great, she knows what she's doing. She's in motion. But is that motion where you want to go? And I think that's the question to ask. So I set direction and create visibility so people can move with actual confidence and they're not scared. They're not doing it out of fear or out of urgency. So in my current advisory work, Every initiative lives in one shared doc. So we're being transparent. You can understand the why, the what, the metrics for actual success. And
Mhm.
everyone can actually see progress in real time. It minimizes chaos. It removes the guessing and the pressure. And what I've noticed is people move faster when they feel calm, not pressured. So clarity has become my measure of success for myself.
Mhm.
And you can scale output through pressure for a quarter, but you can only scale trust through coherence and being clear with everybody.
Yeah.
And that's the long term goal.
Yeah. I mean, and the impact is huge, right? It's not
Absolutely.
even just on the project itself, but on retention, on like evolve.
And
Yeah.
also your mental health,
Yeah.
right? I mean, like you leave the day feeling like you've accomplished something rather than chasing urgency that's never going to show results.
Well, and when this is going, I mean, that's true of the individual, but it actually it's bigger than that, right? Because when that is a top-down approach, like when you are creating that clarity and that structure and that calm, it's huge impact to the business itself. So, for SaaS founders and leaders that may be listening, many of them are definitely operating inside high growth, high pressure, high noise environments. What's the biggest misconception about calm leadership, would you say?
I think people think it's slow.
Yeah.
They think calm leadership is slow. And I really want to turn that on its head because it isn't slow, it's precise and it's alignment.
Mm.
So you're being precise on the decisions that you're making
Yeah.
and you're
You don't have
aligning
to
with people.
remake them over and over again. That's really what happens
That's
when we
exactly what happened.
crash and rush and urgent, right? Like we end up having to clarify over and over again, remake the same decisions, re-explain why we made them.
Yeah. And good luck. I mean, everyone's burning out through that whole cycle. So calm is definitely not slow.
Yeah.
Calm is taking a beat, understanding the ask, and moving with precision and alignment and executing with results. I mean, everyone is a result driven company. So we're all in that same mindset. But I don't think you need to do it on a baseline of urgency and chaos.
You have to remember what creates the results, and it's people, right? And so we're making sure that we're creating that calm clarity and we're taking care of people. You're,
Yeah.
you're going to get better results. So, what would you say is the first step they can take towards leading with maybe you would call this more emotional intelligence?
Yeah. I think listen to what your teammates are saying. What is their number one complaint or issue that keeps coming up, big or small? I remember I was in one environment where the sales team kept asking for a one pager and we just created it for them. And that was something that was causing them chaos and it wasn't a big ask. And so I think that when people think about chaos, they think about boiling the ocean,
Yep.
right? Like it's so big we don't know where to start. But if you start understanding where the ask is and who it's impacting, and as someone who is revenue driven at companies, I always align it to revenue. You know, what are the things that I can impact now with my team that will contribute to more revenue for the company? And I think that is really the full circle. So when you start thinking like that, a lot of noise drops out of that cycle. You start understanding things don't really matter. It's only maybe two or three things. And if that ocean that you're trying to boil becomes more like a little puddle, like a lake, and it's manageable.
Yeah. I mean, and it can be as simple as asking those clear questions like, what is the job? Who is doing it?
Yeah.
What do they need to do? And getting
Yeah.
really clear with people and instead of trying to boil the ocean. I love that. So if
Yeah.
you can talk to the earlier version of yourself, that one hustling inside chaos driven environments, matching the energy of, what would
Yes.
you tell her?
I would tell her to stop waiting for certainty in her environment and trust herself. There are so many times I can think back where I thought, if I see this chaos, everyone must see this chaos and they'll fix it.
Mm,
And if you're waiting for other people to change for you to be happy, good luck. That's not happening. And so, what I think is every time I overrode my intuition to please or prove myself in an environment, I ended up extending the chaos. And every time I acted from clarity, I started to build without it. And that's the difference between surviving leadership and leading in it for me.
yeah. What truth about self trust do you wish that you had known sooner? Like, specifically, maybe if we go back to that point in that meeting where you shrunk yourself, where you didn't speak up so that you could keep the calm.
That wasn't the first time that that happened, right? But that was the first time I acted on it. And what I would say is listen to yourself and connect with those moments when they happen and have some self awareness as to how you want to change and show up. That was the moment that I chose. This isn't going to happen anymore. But there were tons of moments before that that I could have chosen the same thing and I didn't.
Yeah.
And so I would say that you really have to be true to how you show up in environments and understand the impact that that makes on you as a person, as a leader on your team. And to me, that's something that is a non negotiable for me now moving forward.
Yeah. So tell everyone what Build Without Chaos is and where they can connect with you and learn more.
Yeah. So the heart of my work is Build Without Chaos. So I have a podcast, like I mentioned, where I talk to different leaders, public figures around the world who have been in chaotic environments, which guess what? Everybody has at some point of their life. And they've chosen a different path forward. And they've chosen accountability and how they want to move forward without chaos and what that means for them. So to me, that's a really good start for people who are confused on how to move forward in their environment or how they want to show up. I also have an advisory where I implement Build Without Chaos. And so that's where I really run through the framework of decoding your chaos, designing the calm, and then finally building without chaos. And that's where I help leaders really understand how they can scale through clarity instead of urgency. So you can find me on LinkedIn or buildwithoutchaos.com and you can connect with me there.
Awesome. And we'll have those links in the show notes. Colleen, thank you so much for a powerful conversation. Your story is an incredible reminder that urgency is not leadership and
Yeah.
speed is not strategy. Self trust allows us to choose alignment over optics, clarity over chaos, and the kind of leadership that scales because it's sustainable. To everyone listening, if Colleen's story resonated with you, be sure to check out her podcast and her website and go check her out on LinkedIn. And especially if you've been moving fast, operating in noise, or building success at the cost of your energy, take this episode as permission to pause because the pause is where wisdom lives. As you know, I'm always going to tell you to step into the inner room, and it's where your next level begins. So if you have a self trust story to share, I'd love to hear it. And if you're ready to create yours, I'd love to help you claim it. Visit theselftrustcoach.com or check the show notes for details. And make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the next story. Thank you, Colleen, so much.
Thank you so much, Dawn.